Okay. Long ago, I attempted to pull together from reading many case studies in my own work of why were some groups able to survive for a long time. Now, this wasn't looking at organization. This was looking at robustness and survival over time. And I could not, and I was looking, we coded all the rules. And I thought, well, there must be a particular collective choice rule that is really good, or another one on the boundary. And I looked and I looked and I looked. And fortunately, it's on sabbatical. Fortunately, I had to give lectures, 5 lectures at Harvard that June, so I was really under pressure. And I thought that I really was depressed. And I finally realized I had to go up a level, away from specific rules and looking at more general principles, and that was what was eventually published in Governing the Commons. Cox, Arnold, and Villamayor have just published. It's up on the line yet. It won't be. It's still another 3 or 4 weeks before it's out officially, but you can find it at Ecology and Society as forthcoming. They've now looked at over 90 studies where people have looked at the design principles, and it's not 100% support, and I'd be flabbergasted if it was, because my intention was this was the best I could do, and I wanted to get it out there so that we could test it and improve it and move on. But they've found very substantial support and some challenge, and they propose a slight revision in 3 of the design principles. I had put that people had clearly defined the boundaries of themselves and the resource together as one principle. They separated them because some people found boundaries well defined but not people, or the other way around, and for analysis it's better to separate them. I had congruence, primarily social, between those who were wealthy and those who had obligations, and they made it both social and ecological. And I had monitoring at the individual, face-to-face to others, and they added monitoring of the resource itself. So they took 3 of the principles and made them, in case of boundaries, 1A, 1B. But that was the sole amount of change, which I was somewhat flabbergasted with. So we do need to quickly ask why design principles enhance robustness. And I think if we start thinking about that, what they do when people design their own system that fits those boundaries, the people are somewhat assured that others are following. So we know who's in. We know that others are monitoring one another, so that if I can go out there and invest heavily, I won't be a sucker. And I think avoiding suckerhood is one of the things that is a very strong who wants to put an immense amount of work in and find that others aren't. It resolves conflicts before they escalate. It stimulates learning. So one of the things that happens is if you have different people coming up in a region with different rules and they go to market and discover that one is doing a lot better than others, they can begin to do trial and error and learn from one another. What are some of the threats to them? Well, when the boundaries are mismatched, so you have a rigid boundary and the local forest is different shape and a local irrigation system is different shape, as sometimes happens when you have only general authorities and you can't create resource-related, then that's a very rough problem. When there's poor information about a resource, as sometimes because of the ecological nature, Jim Wilson has done a lot of work showing that some fisheries are mathematically chaotic. And if it's a chaotic mathematical setting, it's very hard to learn from your own experiments in it. Many times we have imposed blueprints. One of my concerns about our EDD is that I'm afraid it's a lot of blueprint thinking. We won't get into that in detail today, but my prediction is that it's not going to be successful unless people really move ahead on that and think of it differently. Corruption is always a threat, and corruption can occur at small, medium, and large. Over-dependence on external aid. So sometimes communities have really worked hard, and all of a sudden people come in with all sorts of money, and they have 5 years of money, and then it disappears. Well, they've lost some of their ways of organizing that they had before all the money came, and they were actually worse off in year 7 or 8. When the design principles that they're using aren't transmitted across generations, there can be problems. And when the young people are taught that their seniors really are primitive and don't know science, they sometimes reject what their grandparents have learned. And if you have rules that increase inequities over time, that is also a threat. So I am making an argument that to study robustness, we do need to change the social sciences. There are many people in this room who are already doing that, but there are many people out there that are not really trying to figure out how to get how to be trained in your own discipline, or two. I have two, but I then work with colleagues who are doing remote sensing and really love it, but I have to work with them, but I respect their methods. And it's how we gain our own methods strongly, and then how we work with others so that we can, as a team, develop various methods. And we need to understand that governance can be multi-tiered, polycentric, and that is frequently a stronger way of organizing. And instead of thinking complexity is an error on our part, the social sciences need to understand that the systems we're studying are complex, and we need different methods to be able to understand that. And we need to learn how to triangulate methods. And I'll advertise a new book by Amy Poteet, Marco Jansen, and myself on working together, and collective action, the commons, and multiple methods in practice, where we are looking at that theory over time and what we've learned from case studies, from large N, from experimental, from agent-based models, from game theory, etc., and how do we build that theory today. So we have basic lessons. There is no single ideal type of governance structure. Institutional monocultures are not robust, because while some of them might be robust to one or another problems, there are going to be all sorts of problems in an environment, and if everyone has the same rules, some of them are going to fail. We have a very dangerous tendency to try to impose uniform rules. And frequently, in terms of protected areas, all of the design is in some city way away from the protected area without the involvement of local people. And then those rules on paper that somebody has written are considered the rules. And rarely are things on paper effective unless people understand them and really use them. So I was told to end by noon. I tried, so I want to thank you for listening, and I want to thank, I've had an incredible set of colleagues through the years with whom I've worked, both in the field and trying to put these things together. So I have to thank my colleagues and all the people we've interviewed and worked with in the field, and I'd be open for questions.